You got it. All right, I think we're mostly in here. We purposely had a little extra time in various places in case there were extra people who wanted to speak. So this morning we have Martin Rothler. Did I say that right? Good. He's a principal researcher at Microsoft and a member of the team that develops the Azure Quantum. He is based in Pacific Northwest, and prior to joining Microsoft, he was a leader for the Quantum IT group at NEC Labs in America and Princeton. And from 2011-2013, he was the PI of the TORC project in the IARPA QCS program that developed tools for quantum synthesis, error correction, and quantum resource estimation. And I think he's going to talk about some of the tools Microsoft is developing this morning.
Okay, thank you. Let me just begin by saying it's really cool to go back to these in-person events. I've made a lot of connections here. It's very nice. So,
I mean, whatever you prefer.
but the folks on Zoom probably can't hear me, right? So.
We can ask them.
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Then I'll just speak like that. What I want to do today, I want to walk you through what Azure Quantum is. It's going to be brief, hopefully not very painful. I'm going to show you some of the ways you can sign up. And we'll have new features we're rolling out this year, and they might be cool for some folks here. They have to do with hybrid compute and what kind of the new abilities are that we're going to unlock with some of our hardware partners. So very roughly speaking, quantum software development looks something like this. So it goes from your choice of the programming framework. That's typically the first thing you have to settle on, you have to decide on. And what's nice is that now there are all these different languages and they have advantages of certain kinds, right? So in Azure, we support Q#, which is a high-level programming language. You can express things easily, like, for instance, conjugations like U, V, U, dagger, right? And it knows that a structure like that came about and can later use simplifications that are possible then, right? If you control such a thing, for instance, you don't have to control all three blocks. You just have to control the middle thing. Stuff like that's really nice to express in Q#, or managing of qubits, right? So, or auxiliary qubits. You don't have to explicitly have a global register and figure out which qubit goes where. But we know that other languages have other strengths, right? Qiskit has strength around near-term devices. They have a lot of investment in error mitigation, in layout methods to map qubits to certain geometries. So we know that our users actually use a whole spectrum of languages. You can come with any of them and you can run it on Azure Quantum. That's the message I want to send you. You don't have to use a specific language, take any of these languages, and you can program. It goes even further. You don't even have to use a language. If you just want to use the APIs of these backends, so that these third-party provider backends that give you access to real hardware, right? So they typically have an API that you can send gates to, and that's in a certain format. Often it's JSON, some kind of even text-based formats. If you can just generate that, you're able to submit it through the service as well. So you don't even have to use programming framework. But I gotta say it's very nice because you typically have some Jupyter integration and Jupyter Notebook integration and a good language. It certainly helps. You also have to choose your classical compute, right? So oftentimes you have to do side computation, pre-computations, analysis, and so that is also a choice. And then as part of your development cycle, typically you rely on good simulators and resource estimators, that kind of stuff, right? Because you want to write tests, check that things are correct against the noise-free case, and then maybe use noisy simulators and so on. I'm personally very excited about a new simulator that our team developed. It's a sparse simulator, so it exploits sparsity of the wave function. It scales with that, so we can simulate over 100 qubits, for instance, in case of where there is sparsity in the wave function. That happens, for instance, in chemistry. It happens also in some implementations of Shor's algorithm, that you choose encodings of the arithmetic where it's kind of sparse, and then you can go to over 100 qubits, kind of likely. Then at the end, you target these backends, like the hardware backends. Today, you can already target IonQ and Quantinuum. Quantinuum is the former Honeywell group. They merged with Cambridge Quantum, a startup. And we are unlocking a Rigetti and QCI later this year. That goes through a different mechanism than these other two, but that's going to be ready this summer. And people can already sign up for a private preview. So it's signing up is very easy. I just want to here in a screenshot show you that once you create a subscription, you then can choose your providers, and there's already $500 of free credits for any hardware provider. So you like for each. So you get $500 for IonQ, $500 for Continuum, and you can spend them. Of course, it doesn't last very long. These ion traps are kind of expensive, but it gives you an idea what it's like to work with those systems. I want to also talk a little bit about the future. So we are part of an alliance called QAW, and Oak Ridge is part of it. A bunch of our hardware partners are part of it, and it's growing. I think PNNL is very active as well, and maybe already is partnering in there too. Sorry if you're already part of this, and I have to update the slide with the logos. But the idea is the following. So in a sense, you want to capture in quantum algorithms, you want to capture the classical pieces and the quantum pieces both and compile them into some representation that then can be deployed to devices. And you want to do it in a way that's kind of as agnostic to the language as possible and as agnostic to the platform, and only at the very end kind of become specific and exploit the structures. So that way you can then leverage kind of the principle to write the code once and deploy it to many different platforms. Kind of future-proofs you a little bit in terms of your investment. But also we want to kind of be able to connect to emerging technologies. Whatever comes next, we want to be able to connect to it. So that's the idea behind QAW, and very active. People contribute interfaces to it. So at Oak Ridge, the compiler team provided interfaces between QCore, and that allowed also some other languages like Circ and Qiskit to be compilable to QAW. ANG provided interfaces as well from the PNNL team, and it's growing kind of that idea that you don't have to build n times m different connections, right? If you have n languages and m backends, you just have to build n plus k, right? N front ends and m backends. So that is definitely happening, and this is part of this QAW, and it's a real thing. We have these kind of internal demonstrations of that, and then now we're rolling it out into private preview. And yeah, so what I wanted to show you is one example that is enabled by this QAW, and that has to do with phase estimation. So as you all know, like standard approaches to estimate the kind of ground state energies, for instance, of a Hamiltonian, there are very, very different choices, right? One is VQE, for instance. We know the scaling, we know the limitations of that. It's bound by the standard limit, so it scales like with 1/epsilon², many shots that you basically need to do, right? On the other hand, you have phase estimation methods. They have better scaling, but typically much more depth. So hybrid compute allows you in principle to leverage advantages from both worlds. You can reduce the depth in many cases by just adaptively choosing the next power of your unitary. You can choose that on the fly, but for that you need the ability to make the choice while the quantum state is coherent, because you don't want to collapse it, right? You want to keep going with the next round of phase estimation. So there's a paper that Nathan Weeb and Cassandra Grenade have in preparation. So they talk about a model like this, where you do the adaptive computation on the fly. So you try to estimate the eigenvalue. There's a model, mu and sigma, the expectation, the variance of that estimator, and you update it in each step. So you initialize a quantum state, you do a measurement, update your model, and then you keep going. And while you're doing that, the state is still coherent. Okay, and then you can keep going until you set a certain number of rounds or so. Or you could even make that depending on some properties of, like, maybe the variance is now small enough. If that sounds futuristic, it is futuristic, but it's actually running already on some devices. So QCI, which is a superconducting-based startup in Yale, their system actually hooks up to QAW, and it's able to run this algorithm. And this is the findings. Like in that case, the eigenvalue was just 0.5. It was just a Z rotation on one qubit, and we wanted to detect it. And that ran in this kind of adaptive way where the state stayed coherent during the execution. So we hope to make that better, obviously. And the message I want to send is this is now available for sign up. If people are interested in these capabilities, please shoot me an email and we'll add you to our beta tester list, and you'll have access to these devices very shortly. And final thing I want to mention is these, okay, this is the Sparse Simulator I mentioned earlier. I'm just going to zoom through that. This is using basically hashing of the wave function. You can go over 100 qubits in many cases. And I just want to mention these credit programs, the $500 program I mentioned already. So that gets you started, but that doesn't last very long. There's also a $10,000 credit program that's probably much more interesting for the folks here. That gives you also access right now to IonQ and Continuum. And it allows you to do a couple million shots on those devices, which may or may not be enough to write a paper. We've seen cases where it was enough. In other cases, we then just like worked with the researchers and gave them more credits so they could finish their papers. But that is maybe an opportunity for folks here. Again, if you're interested, let me know, and we'll set you up with that. With those credits, you will have to provide a short description of what you want to do, but it's pretty informal. It's like 1 or 2 paragraphs of text, and you can get started. And if you're interested in these hybrid features where states are staying coherent and you can do stuff, also let me know, and I will add you to our beta tester list. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.